नेटवर्क का कुछ इशू है मैं 2 मिनट कॉल करूँ इंटरनेट कनेक्शन अब मेरा ये वाला चेंज कर this is not the account. There is my account secretary PDF लक्ष्य 2 मिनट में कॉल करूँ This is not the account. This is a different account. मैं 2 मिनट कॉल कर Yeah. How would I open another site?
Can you hear me, Radhe and Vladimir?
Yes, I can hear you. We don't see Dr. Ravi, although I know that she's on.
Yeah, she's connecting, and we have contacted Karen Singh and sent the Zoom link to him. So I guess it's getting sorted out.
Okay, perfect. We'll just sit tight for a couple minutes as people are still logging in anyways.
Yeah.
Namaste, Pashi ji, namaste. I'll sit there. Okay.
So for all attendees that are signing in and getting situated, we'll be starting in just a few moments.
Wasn't that the idea? There it is.
Can you hear me?
Yes, good evening, Karan Singh. Namaste.
Namaskar.
Namaste.
I'm sorry I'm a little late. Problem.
Your voice is a bit breaking. If we could have a little bit microphone closer, maybe. I do not know whether it is doable.
Is that clearer now?
Oh, it's better. It's better. Yeah.
Okay, and Dr. Karen Singh, whenever you are comfortable and ready, we'll have Anu open the webinar, so you let us know.
All right. Let's start.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anu, we'll turn it over to you.
I thought that the program said that welcome and introduction, 5 minutes, is that over?
Why is it not clear?
Yes, here. I'll start off if you like. I'm quite ready.
Okay.
Yes, Anu will do a short introduction to the topic and to you, and then we'll turn it over to you. So Anu, if you want to go ahead and open.
Welcome everyone to the series of 7 webinars in celebration of the Mothers and Auroville's birth anniversary. This series continues until February 28th, which is Auroville's birthday, and is part of the Auroville Festival and hosted by Auroville Foundation in collaboration with La Grace Center in the USA. My name is Anu Legrand, and I am an Aurovillian, a resident of Auroville for over 42 years. To begin, let us come together in a moment of silence. The topic that will be addressed today by our three distinguished guests, Dr. Karan Singh, Dr. Jayanti Ravi, and Pashi Kapur, is the 5 dreams of Sri Aurobindo. This message for the future of India and the world takes special relevance today as the situation intensifies around the world. Sri Aurobindo differed in many ways from Gandhi in the approach to India's freedom. For ironically, the prophet of non-violence was taken in his very final hours through violence. And that is what the first dream of Sri Aurobindo addressed for India. I'll just run through the bios, the introduction to each person, each of our panelists. So with this short introduction to the topic, it is my pleasure to introduce our honorable guests. First, Dr. Karan Singh. Dr. Karan Singh was born on the 9th of March in 1931 to Maharaja Hari Singh and Maharani Tara Devi. He was head of state, Jammu and Kashmir, for 18 years. He did his
If everybody could kindly keep on mute while Anu is speaking, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
So he was the head of state of Jammu and Kashmir for 18 years, did his PhD on the political thought of Sri Aurobindo. Dr. Karan Singh joined the Union Cabinet of Srimati Indira Gandhi in 1967 at the age of 36, the youngest person to become a cabinet minister, elected 4 times to the Lok Sabha from the Udhampur constituency in Jammu and Kashmir. He was appointed ambassador to the United States in 1989 and was India's member on the UNESCO governing board. He chaired the Oroville Foundation as chairman of its governing board for 20 years and was a 4-time member of the Rajya Sabha. He is recognized as an outstanding thinker in India and abroad and has written 20 books on a variety of subjects. Our second panelist today is Dr. Jayanti Ravi, the secretary of the Oroville Foundation. A scientist, civil servant, performing vocalist, administrator, thinker, and a widely traveled development practitioner, Dr. Jayanti Ravi entails many realms of experience in her multifaceted career. She holds a master's degree in nuclear physics from the University of Madras, an MPA from Harvard University, and a PhD specializing in technology-enhanced education. Having authored books, case studies, newspaper articles, published papers in international journals, she has also guided doctoral students and has been a visiting faculty at Harvard University. Her professional repertoire includes serving as DDO at Sabarkantha, collector of Panchamahal, director of NAC in the Prime Minister's office, in addition to principal secretary and commissioner. Also in rural development in Gujarat. She has championed the Swachh Bharat mission for rural sanitation in the state for 2 consecutive years. Until recently, she was principal secretary of the Health and Family Welfare Department, Gujarat, after being Commissioner Health for over 2 years. She now serves as secretary of Oroville Foundation. Dr. Ravi is a devotee of Mother and Sri Aurobindo and has closely worked and been mentored by Professor Kirit Joshi. With complete faith in the Mother and Sri Aurobindo, she is currently offering her efforts and a sincere aspiration at the lotus feet of the Mother to move towards the manifestation of the Mother's dream, a city of goodwill and harmony Auroville. And our third panelist for today is Pashi Kapur. Pashi has a mechanical engineering background with 16 years of senior management experience with multinational engineering companies based in Kolkata, when he came in contact with the mother the first time in April 1968, just a couple of months following the inauguration of Auroville. Enchanted by both the mother and her unique project, Pashi became an enthusiastic volunteer to serve her in any manner she deemed fit. In 1970, she gave him an enthusiastic approval for a project she had named Oro Service to relate with centers all over India and to take up locally viable projects based on skills and competence of devotees in the spirit of Karma Yoga to generate revenue for the center and to support Auroville. In 1972, Pashi was assigned the task of organizing various states to formally celebrate Sri Aurobindo's birth centenary. And with the support of friends, he organized these celebrations in a number of states across India. In 1973, his birthday in March, he received his final permission to join Auroville and moved to Aspiration in December 1973. Having met Roger in 1969, he had become part of Roger Anger's think tank along with Prem Malik and Ramanathan. But from 1973, he became an integral part of the Oro Future Office till 1978. And he was appointed member secretary of the Comité Administratif de Auroville from 1974 to 1978. He would rejoin Oro Future again in the year 2000, and since then has been active in various fields of activities such as member of special committees and task forces. For example, the statutory recognition of the master plan, land resource development, and the oversight committee of the governing board, and so on. So before handing over the space to Dr. Karan Singh, please, everybody who has joined us today, please note that there will be questions, time for questions. So if you could kindly post your questions in the Q&A box rather than in the chat box. So for now, over to you, Dr. Karan Singh. Yeah.
And you will have to unmute yourself, sir. Let's see if I can do it.
Yeah. Can I do something?
Yeah, I think somebody's going to help him here in a second to unmute.
I can't.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Hear me now?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, all right.
I'm going very high.
Let's start again. Anu Majumdar, Dr. Jayanti Ravi, good friend Pashi Kapur, whom I can't see at the moment, and everybody else who's listening in. I'd like to commend the Auroville Foundation and Lagras, USA, for organizing this series of webinars in connection with the birthday of Auroville and the mother's birth. I think that it's a very rich repast. I have been given the topic of speaking on 5 dreams. Before I get into the 5 dreams, I'd like very briefly to go through the 5 phases of Sri Aurobindo's life. Janma Bhumi, Calcutta, for 7 years. Shiksha Bhumi, England, for 14 years. Sadhana Bhumi, Baroda, 12 years. The Karma Bhumi, Calcutta, 5 turbulent years. Those were the years when he was put into jail, jail for the bomb conspiracy case. And I must read what C.R. Das, in his defense lawyer, said in closing speech. I'll quote. He said, "Quite extraordinary. My appeal to you is this, that long after the controversy will be hushed in silence, long after the turmoil and agitation have ceased, long after he is dead and gone, he will be looked upon as the poet of patriotism, as the prophet of nationalism, and the lover of humanity. Long after he is dead and gone, his words will have echoed and re-echoed, not only in India, but across distant seas and lands. Therefore, I say, the man in his position is not only standing before the bar of this court, but before the bar of the High Court." Very dramatic words by C.R. And that is the Karma Bhumi. Then the Yoga Bhumi for 40 years, Pondicherry. He's been through all these different phases in his life, each one of which is fascinating. Now let me come to the 5 dreams. I will not take too much time to read them out because I have not been given a great deal of time. But I'll go through them and try and present them to you. The first dream was a revolutionary movement to create a free and united India. India today is free, but he has not achieved it. So he is obsessed with the idea of Indian unity. He says that this partition is there, but partition must go. Because as long as it lasts, India will be seriously weakened, even crippled. Civil strife may remain always possible, possibly even a new invasion and foreign conflict. Now let's see how this dream can play out. I cannot see any way in which India can start again to bring Bangladesh and Pakistan into its fold, even if that was desirable, which I don't think it is. The only way I think this can happen is if SAARC were to have developed on the lines of the European Union. You will recall in Europe, France, Great Britain, and Germany were at each other's throats for 1,000 years. And yet, when the revolution came, when the European Union emerged, they suddenly became one union. The franc disappeared, the lira disappeared, the mark disappeared, there was a European currency. That is the only way in which unity can once again be established. I think my comment on Sri Aurobindo's first dream is, although it is a noble idea, any idea that we bring back physically these territories into India, I don't think is practical. He has said, in the way unity must finally come about under whatever form, the exact form may have a pragmatic but not a fundamental importance. But by whatever means, in whatever way, division must go. So, SAARC at present, I'm afraid, is moribund because of the Indo-Pak. One day, perhaps, if India and Pakistan can solve our problems, mutual problems, SAARC can be revived. That is the only way, I think, Sri Aurobindo's first dream. The second dream was for the resurgence and liberation of the peoples of India and the return, peoples of Asia, and the return to a great role in the progress of human society. That, I think, has been fulfilled. Asia is now entirely free of colonial domination. Asia has risen. China, which is a great Asian power, has risen. India is a great Asian power, has risen. Japan has risen. Asia, I think, has begun to play its role in world affairs as Sri Aurobindo had indeed. There, I think, he is spot on, already happened. Now, the third dream was a world unit forming the outer basis of a fairer and brighter and nobler life for all men. He spoke about the unification of the human world is underway. There is an imperfect initiation organized was struggling against tremendous difficulty. He says that if that does not happen, and these are very ominous words, catastrophe may intervene, interrupt or destroy what is being done. Even then, the final result is sure. Now, this sentence has always haunted me. What does he mean by saying a catastrophe may intervene? Are we moving towards a catastrophe today as we speak? Already today, I just saw before we started this program on the news that Russia has started to bring out its nuclear deterrence. Now, I don't know whether this will be it or whether something else will come up today or something. With the amount of fissionable material on planet Earth now, we've lost sight of the fact that over the last 70 years since after the end of the Cold War, the nuclear weapons have been proliferating in every country. And there's so much nuclear fissionable material on planet Earth. It requires just one chingari to set off a major catastrophe. So he has said that unification is in the interest of all, but if we do not do it, a catastrophe may intervene. Then he says, unification, therefore, is in the interest of all. Only human imbecility and stupid selfishness can prevent it. Let us not underestimate human imbecility and stupid selfishness, because I'm afraid that is the way in which most of the world functions. So he says something very, very important towards the end of this. He says, nationalism will have fulfilled itself and lost its militants and would no longer find these things incompatible with self-preservation and the integrality of its outlook. New spirit of oneness will take hold of it. And to say Aurobindo, prophet of nationalism, by the end of his life, he had outgrown nationalism. He says nationalism has fulfilled itself. Interestingly, Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore also was not only nationalist. He wrote several articles against nationalism. What Sri Aurobindo did was not negate nationalism, but transcend nationalism. I think this is a very, very important part of the film. When he says a new spirit of oneness will take hold of the human race, I'm sorry, I don't see that spirit. Even countries that were together are beginning to fight against each other. When this human spirit of oneness will descend, I cannot say. At present, it is not visible. So the third dream, I'm afraid, of human unity is also very far from realization. Of course, Sri Aurobindo talks in a different time frame, not in our time frame, dozen years. But the fact is that the third dream also seems to be present to be highly problematic. About my friend Pashi. Fourth dream, another dream, the spiritual gift of India to the world has already begun. Indian spirituality is entering Europe and America in an increasing measure. That movement will grow with the disasters of the time. More and more eyes are turning towards her. There is even an increasing resort, not only to her teachings, but to her psychic experience. This has been fulfilled. Since Swami Vivekananda, there has been a deluge of Vedanta and Indian philosophy in the West, and not only philosophy, but also the practice. Karma Yoga and the other yoga practices, Kriya Yoga, ISKCON, and so on. And there is this yoga, thanks to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the Day of Yoga, the World Day of Yoga, has taken yoga across the world. Yoga, of course, is much more than the physical exercises that we see. But nonetheless, it is an important opening. So the fourth dream, I would say, is like the second dream, the rise of Asia, is fulfilled. The fourth dream of Indian spirituality entering Europe and America has been fulfilled. And then Interestingly enough, it is only in the fifth dream that he comes to the higher consciousness. You see, it is important to remember that till the end of his life, Sri Aurobindo remained interested in world affairs, what was happening. He kept in touch. When the Cripps mission came, he wrote to the Congress to say, please accept this, because this is the last possibility of keeping India united. He was ignored. And partition came about with all its demands. He was always there. You see, his yogic reputation was so strong, people forget this. Like Rabindranath Tagore's literary stature was so high after the Nobel Prize, people forgot that he was interested in his essays, for example, on nationalism. Sri Aurobindo remained concerned, and therefore it is only the fifth and the last dream of his where he speaks. Final dream, a step in evolution, raise man to a higher and larger consciousness, begin the solution of the problems that perplexed her. Man first began to think and to dream of individual perfection and the perfect design. He says, this is still a personal hope and an ideal. It has begun to take hold both in India and in the West on forward. The difficulties in the way are more formidable than in any other field of endeavor. Difficulties were made to overcome. If the supreme will is there, it will be overcome. Here too, if evolution is to take place, since it must proceed to a growth of the spirit and the inner consciousness, the initiative can come from India. Although the scope must be universal, the central movement. With this, he ends his 5 dreams. Such is the content which I put into the state of India's liberation. Whether or how far this hope will be justified depends upon the new entry. It's very, very significant. Sri Aurobindo's birthday was the day that India attained independence. And this year, the 22nd of August, the 15th of August, which will be the 75th anniversary of the Indian Republic, will be the 150th anniversary of Sri Aurobindo. The tremendous simplicity here. Clearly, Sri Aurobindo's force, his ideas are there. We've not been able to live up to them. As I said, as far as I can see, only 2 of the 5 dreams are really nearing possibility. The other 2 is going in the opposite direction, and the 5th one, of course, the upbeat one. I'll end with a limerick, which, as you know, is an amusing poem, 5-line poem, which I learned a long time ago. God's plan made a hopeful beginning, but man spoiled his chances by sinning. We know that the story will end in God's glory, but at present the other side is here. So all of us who are involved in the Aurobindo movement, who are involved in the movement, the consciousness movement, should I say, in different ways, to see Aurobindo and through other possibilities. All of us have to, at this stage, keep ourselves as open as possible, as receptive as possible to the divine force that rains down upon us all the time. Because the asuric forces are very strong. Forces of conflict, forces of confrontation, forces of hatred are very strong. In order to overcome that, we must raise our consciousness. Now I'll end with a share by the great Urdu poet Allama Iqbal, where he says, खुदी को कर बुलंद इतना, डर तकदीर से पहले खुदा बंदे से खुद पूछे बता तेरी रज़ा के. Raise your consciousness to such a level that before taking any decision, the divine will consent. Thank you very much. Hello, back to you.
Yeah, I'm just coming back. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Karan Singh, for outlining the challenges before Sri Aurobindo's 5 dreams and all that is in progress as well. I remember on 15th of August last year, we did a session on the 5 dreams with you. And it was the very day that the there was a regime change in Kabul. So there's a lot in transition in the world. And I think that is part of the realization, difficult realization, but definitely something which will progress towards those five, the realization of all those dreams one by one. So before I go on to the next speaker, please share your questions, your comments in the Q&A box, preferably, which we will take up at the end of the session. So now over to Dr. Jayanti Ravi.
Namaste to everybody. Good morning and good evening to all our distinguished viewers. I want to specially convey my greetings to Dr. Karan Singh, Shri Pashi Kapur, who both are extremely tall personalities in their 90s. And I feel very privileged to also share my views. And of course, I want to thank Vladimir, Radhe, Anu, and the entire team, which has made this beautiful webinar commemorating the Auroville Festival, the 150th birthday of Sri Aurobindo, possible. I would like to start with Sri Aurobindo Gayatri. Om Tatsaviturvaram Rupam Jyotihi Parasya Dhimahi Yanna Satyena Deepayet Satyena Deepayet Om Tat Saviturvaram Rupam Jyoti Parasya Dhimahi Yanna Satyena Deepayet Satyena Deepayet. When we look at the 5 dreams of Sri Aurobindo that have been described by Dr. Karan Singh ji, I just thought we would start first with the entire context of this. What was the context? When was this whole speech about the 5 dreams? There's a certain context. India got her freedom on 15th of August 1947, which we all know. Dr. Karan Singh just mentioned, we're celebrating the Amrit Mahotsav, or the 75th year of the independence we're celebrating of India. And that day also happened to be the birthday of Sri Aurobindo. And in fact, in all his humility, we know that he had played a very significant role. And on that day, his age, he was 75 years old, after really spending 38 full years straddling in the world of intellect, knowledge, revolutionary work, political, absolutely into politics, doing cutting edge work there during the freedom struggle, and then coming to Pondicherry at the age of 38, almost 40 years was spent at Pondicherry by then, by the time this speech that he gave, which is so special, called 5 Dreams of Sri Aurobindo. He had moved out from being actively involved in the outer world, but there was, as we all know, a point of inflection, a significant moment in his life when he was imprisoned at the Alipur prison. And he actually has an experience of Sri Krishna Kali, which he explains beautifully, and the impact of it in the Uttarpara speech. And after that, there's a complete turn in his life. And his mother often draws and shows us this diagram that if you were to follow the path of normal life, it's a kind of zigzag to reach the goal, whereas the path of yoga takes you straight there. And also to drive home the point that the inner work and outer work are actually not different. They have a great contribution to each other, the inner and the outer. So he was here also aiming not just for the immediate, if I may use the word, the myopic vision of just India's freedom, but something far more important, which would subsume India's freedom. But he really thought of true rising and raising the consciousness of the entire humanity. And this freedom that India got was certainly an important milestone in that journey. And at that time, when he was 75 years of age, when he heard this news, he was delighted. And the All India Radio at Tiruchirappalli requested him for a speech, the All India Radio Tiruchirappalli station. And he writes this out. We were very curious and keen to see if a recorded version of his speech would be available. But unfortunately, that is not to be. We are given to understand that there's no recorded speech of his original voice, but this was read out by an announcer there. And just again to refresh it, the first dream was a revolutionary movement which would create a free and united India. The second was a resurgence and liberation of the peoples of Asia and her return to her great role in the progress of human civilization. Work in progress again, the first one also partly done. The third was a world union forming the outer basis of a fairer, brighter, and nobler life for all mankind. The fourth was a spiritual gift of India to the world, and that had already begun back then, going by the great deal of interest, even from the famous speech that Swami Vivekananda gave at the Parliament of Religions, and even beyond, before that, I mean, for a long time, India's spiritual gift not only to Europe and America, as has been delineated in his speech, but when he says for the entire world, including Africa, all over the world, that is certainly on now. And the fifth was, I think, the key to all of this, which I may say has been Sri Aurobindo's unique contribution, and I think the most important key to realizing all of this, a policy, a program, and a project of consciousness, raising the consciousness, and actually not treating it as something divorced from normal things that you do, but to really blend the two and bring in the synthesis of spirit and matter in all walks of life. And actually, that was the name that he gave Integral Yoga. So if we come back to the 5 dreams now, there is something, very fact, why did India get her freedom on his birthday? We do, if we really look at it in the right perspective, a lot of us who have immense faith in Sri Aurobindo and the mother would also see that this was not just an accident. I'm sure there was some very, very significant divine meaning behind this, but given his modesty, his humility, he does say that as a mystic, I take this identification not as a coincidence or fortuitous accident, but as a sanction and seal of the divine power, which guides my steps on the work with which I began life. And he also says many dreams later in this that he nourished and cherished from the time he was a child, in his youth, and so on. He says, all I can do is to make a personal declaration of the aims and ideals conceived in my childhood and youth. Now, again, here, one may wonder that his childhood was quite, in a context very sort of removed from India. His father, as we all know, was an Anglophile who didn't want any touch of Indian culture to really influence his son. But nevertheless, if you look at his childhood, his interests, his preferences really do indicate and show a consciousness which was extremely wide, deep, and raised. So the poetry that he wrote, all of it. So not only on this special day when he was 75 years of age, there's another significant thing. Almost all the works, important works, writings that he had done, Life Divine, The Human Cycle, The Synthesis of Yoga, the Ideal of the, I mean, all these works, a majority of them were completed by the time this particular incident of India gaining her freedom happened. What was left? A little bit of the ideal of human unity. There was a small postscript that he wrote, and also Savitri work when Savitri was on. But other than that, the kind of maturity, having really spent nearly 50 years in Pondicherry and doing inner work and having done amazing outer work in the world, really immersing himself in all of that. This was a being which was completely ready at that time to give a vision, not just a small vision, but something which is absolutely relevant, futuristic, concurrent, and absolutely relevant even today. And I think that vision also gives all of us a mission. It defines for us what is it that we need to do. And in that sense, this whole the 5 dreams that he spells out is very important. If we go to the first dream, which is about freedom, which we just spoke, freedom and unity of India. As we all realize, freedom is an event. Of course, there's a lot of effort, there's a lot of things that happened, but eventually it was on a single day. But when we really talk of unity, nation building, people coming together, that is a slightly more time-taking, slower process. And that really entails a lot of complexity, work, and so on. But of course, when we talk of unity, it's about different dimensions, cultural, the way technology has played a role, the access to health, education, livelihood, all of this. And therefore, we are today, I would say positively, in a large way, far more united, connected than India was back then. Of course, the most visible and disturbing fact about this unity that he refers to very directly is about the partition of India. And while he does say that this is something that is absolutely not desirable, but if we really read what he has said, he does mention that the partition of the country must go. And he says later, but by whatever means, the division must and will go. And I am a bit of a diehard optimist. And I do feel that just as was explained, the European Union and all of this, we've seen the Berlin Wall falling down. We've seen so many historic things that have completely changed the geography, the dynamic of the world, and not from an outer work alone, but if there is truly that critical mass of raised consciousness where we're not really talking from a sense of cornering land, cornering wealth, amassing, having greater domination, but from that sense of really raising our level to truly become willing servitors of the divine and actually offering ourselves. I do think that doesn't seem an impossibility. It may seem like something which is a difficult thing to attain, but possibly in our lifetime, some of us may be, and we do hope and pray we're able to see that. The second was about a resurgence and liberation of the peoples of Asia. While liberation in a dictionary sense of really having gotten freedom, that too, it's not really as if it's a monotonic, clear, linear movement that has happened. There is a lot of turbulence, and we do see that sometimes there are ups and downs, but the overall curve is moving up in terms of liberation of the peoples of Asia. But is this really true resurgence and her return to her great role in the progress of human civilization? Because all of us who've visited the playground at the ashram and we're familiar of the map that was put up there, it's not a political map of India. It doesn't show, but it really shows the spiritual map of India, which encompasses all of these countries, because we all really have a great cultural heritage. And there he talks of India's role, statesmanship. And he also says that, it has got a place in the committee, in the Council of Nations. And of course, India too here, not only with respect to Asia, but certainly in terms of trade, in terms of so many areas, SARC too as a body, films, media, music, art, education, technology, economy, trade, all of this, India has played a very key role in this region of Asia too. So, and especially now in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals, climate change, the kind of stance India has been taken with a great deal of dignity, fairness, neutrality, and positivity at the United Nations, the Security Council, all of it. I think it really augurs well, and we are living up to this role of India's statesmanship that Aurobindo referred to. The third is about world union, forming the outer basis of a fairer, brighter, and nobler world. And here, I think while a lot of people feel that Aurobindo's writing is sometimes dense, but I think every word has a significance. So if we note these words, he's talking of a new life for mankind as well, new, greater, brighter, and nobler life. So this new life, it's not just tinkering with what already was some kind of a status quo. Let things happen, let it be business as usual. No, it was about something which may appear disruptive. There might be churning, but then what comes of it is definitely going to take us to a completely new level in this journey of truly raising our consciousness and having that touch the lives of the entire humanity. And the second is greater. So not only is this disruptive, but the direction, it's upward, greater. It's not something that's pulling us down, brighter, because this is something which is illumined by a deeper, higher knowledge, something which is far beyond our small egos, our sense of owning something, our preferences, our likes, our judgments, but giving, consecrating all of that. And when he says noble, a nobler life for mankind, a love is probably that kind of oneness and unity where it's not ego, this feeling that I need to dominate on others, power struggle, I need to corner more, amass more, but then more about realizing that we're all one. And if we truly become willing servitors to the divine consciousness and really don't worry about what is my preference, what is it that I want, I need, but more in terms of what is it that the divine asks of me. And that becomes palpable, and we can hear it if we really function from that consciousness. And then when he also talks of this unification of mankind and a world union, I would there too, he talks of not a slow and timid progress, but he uses a very strong set of adjectives. He says it should be bold and swift development. And in that context too, I would say that the changes that have been happening now across the world, and if you even look at the image of India in this whole thing, because to really emerge as somebody who can play a key role in bringing about this unification, not just external, but also something that connects all of us together. I think India has the pride. I have spent a lot of my childhood also traveling abroad. I did my A-levels from the University of London. This was in the 80s. And I can say that when one lived out there abroad, the kind of respect, the kind of dignity and pride that we would feel as Indians at that time was probably, we see a marked, palpable difference now. I mean, a few years ago when I went to study at the Harvard Kennedy School, I find that the respect that Indians had for their immense contribution, whether it's the Silicon Valley, we have many such people who've come back to Auroville and are contributing with all the expertise they have, whether it is even in a university campus, we were really supposed to be very good at math, music, sports, culture, dance, and even if it was in terms of organizing these professional interest groups. So I think it's very heartwarming that India is beginning to play that role really of being a true leader that can guide. And in a certain way, there is a voluntary fusion that he also talks about. It's not just the outer unification, but he's talking of a true coming together of peoples. And that's about not really the geographical maps and the territories that he's talking of, but something about all of us uniting. And there, I think, if we really go to any of the cities across the world, if you look at the voluntary and the happy fusion of cultures, whether it's in the domain of food, fashion, cuisine, sports, games, architecture, films, technology, music, literature, I think the soft power is, as sometimes we tend to believe, is much harder than hard power. And that is happening. Look at the way the internet, social media, all of that is also really, shrink wrapping all of us, bringing us closer, although this is not without its share of, the digital addiction, and there are problems with this too. But if you look at the positive side, this is there. And similarly, the pandemic that really, turned all our lives upside down, topsy-turvy. We saw that almost every country across the world had to face lockdowns. There were protocols to be followed in public places. Travel was greatly restricted. There were many instances of families and children having to be completely confined to a small apartment and so on. And yet, if you look at the way humanity dealt with it, I am a diehard optimist. And I feel that this was indeed a very sad, a very unfortunate thing to have happened. But nevertheless, the spin-off of it, I think it really brought us to be more responsible, to be more sensitive. The fact that people went in for vaccination, started using masks when they traveled, washing hands, maintaining a distance, physical distance, because you cared not only for your well-being, but also for the well-being of others, quarantining, if you had to quarantine yourself or do what is called reverse quarantine, when the elders in the family or the comorbid people in the family were kept. So these are all indications that this movement is happening. And some of these have also shown that these have actually blurred the barriers between rich and poor, geographical barriers, gender, community level. So it's in a way really bringing us all together. And again, he spoke way back then, something which is very, very current and probably very futuristic, about dual and multilateral citizenship too. Auroville is a small experiment in that direction, and we are trying to see how all this is happening. So this too was very something futuristic that he said, very contemporary, and probably something that is happening now. The Schengen visa, all of this that we are seeing across many parts of the world. These are things that he had dreamt of way back then, and now we see it happen. And then, of course, the spiritual gift of India to the world. Of course, here again, when we really look at the landscape all around, when we do see there's a lot of misery, suffering, conflicts, turmoil, domination, power, amassing, and this way of wanting to corner things, resources for oneself, and not really be transparent, open, participative, and be more compassionate for everybody in a very fair manner. The only answer is our spiritual inheritance that we've got. If we really raise ourselves to the psychic higher consciousness level, and if we have these teaching spiritual and psychic practice that he refers to, integral yoga, which can really lead us to a new way of life, a new approach to life, then we can really transcend these personal preferences, likes, dislikes, and truly make ourselves voluntary and willing servitors of the divine. I mean, we would really be willing to give what we have and not really hold on to things that we feel are our personal preferences. And in this context, the spiritual gift of India, in the context of what Sri Aurobindo said, is not, as we would say, very shushk, dry, shushk as a Hindi word, not something which is just the dry spirituality, but he really talked of integral yoga. And I want to give some examples of initiatives, of projects, and great things that have taken place in Auroville, for example, and how this is already the spiritual gift of India, not only in terms of so many people from across the world coming to India, Indian spirituality almost touching every part of the world, whether it's Buddhism too, there too. In a way, it had its origin in India, of course. And so we see this all across the world. There is a prevalence of a great deal of interest, engagement on this whole thing of raising consciousness. But if we look at certain entities in Auroville, we have an entity called Aquadine, which does this water purification. And just yesterday, when we were talking to Professor Dudu Dien, he spoke about how this gift of not only specializing doing something with matter, but synthesizing matter and spirit together, how he really tried hard to take this to Senegal, and how our team from Auroville went there, interacted with the people there and tried to offer it. The very fact that the spiritual gift of India, coupled with matter, the synthesis of both of these. Similarly, when we look at Swaram, another entity in Auroville, we know that the chimes that they make, I think they create a lot of beautiful, positive sounds all over the world. And I'm told the biggest chime ever made in the world has also been actually handcrafted and made here, while giving employment to a lot of people from a village where there was a lot of hatred, animosity, anger, bloodshed. Similarly, the beautiful work that Joss has done, not only in Pichandikulam, but also at the Adayar Punga. I visited in it and was really touched to see the kind of contribution. Then initiatives like Wasteless that Ribhu Vora here in Auroville has done, and which is now touching the lives of a large number of school children in India. Of course, we could take this to other parts of the world as well. Pottery, people like Angad, who have really created, I've had the privilege of sitting there and baking pottery with him for some time. And similarly, sustainable energy, architecture, Satprem's Earth Institute. So I think the spiritual gift of India to the world, and it's already beginning to happen, has been happening over all these years, but even with in this mode of synthesizing matter and spirit. And finally, the fifth dream, where he really talks about the key to attaining all of this, because all this is about things that would happen, but what is it that can actually lead to it? And there he does talk of uplifting the consciousness to a higher level, evolution. And here, instead of being in a state of ego, which is divisive, which tends to differentiate between me and the other, my possession, my areas, my domination, my land, your land, if you really start thinking in terms of, a whole paradigm of compassion, truth, courage, love, poise. That's what it is when we are more open, receptive to beauty, peace, energy, and not really fight and hold on to our preferences. So there aren't then personal agendas, desires, or preferences, and we truly become willing servitors of the divine consciousness. And the example of this can also be seen in the approach of a mother to a child. It's not, the mother sacrifices so much for a child. And it's because which need is more important. It's not about aggrandizing somebody's needs, but about really being sensitive to what is it that we're here for? What is the larger goal for which we all need to give up our little points of view, but move for that. So these a true trusteeship, if you will. So in this sense, if we also look at something beautiful that Sri Aurobindo had delineated in a work which we've all, I'm sure, read of, called The Human Cycle, he describes the conditions for the coming of a spiritual age. And I like to believe that we are at the threshold. This 150th birth anniversary of Sri Aurobindo is bringing a great deal of energy, force, light, and strength for all of us to really be able to straddle this and move towards that. So I quote him, therefore, if the spiritual change of which we have been speaking is to be effected, it must unite two conditions which have to be simultaneously satisfied, but are most difficult to bring together. There must be the individual and the individuals who are able to see, to develop, to recreate themselves in the image of the spirit, and to communicate both their idea and its power to the mass. And there must be at the same time a mass, a society, a communal mind, or at least the constituents of a group body, the possibility of a group soul, which is capable of receiving and effectively assimilating, ready to follow and effectively arrive, not compelled by its own inherent deficiencies, its defects of preparation, to stop on the way or fall back before the decisive change is made. So in that sense, if we again look at his far-reaching, his absolutely transformatory dreams in the context of where we are poised today. Today, this is the 150th year of his birth. It also happens to be the 75th year of India's independence. Auroville is also poised. It's the 54th birthday tomorrow. We are on the eve of the 54th birthday of Auroville. We're also all the various Aurobindonian entities. This word, I'm not sure all of us may use this word, but whether it's the Sri Aurobindo Ashram Pondicherry, whether it's the Sri Aurobindo Society Gnostic Center, Auroville, Sakar, the center at Kolkata, Hyderabad, Baroda, Sri Aurobindo Nivas, Oro University, we're all coming together in a very beautiful possibility of an integral network of education called the Multiversity, for which a lot of people, particularly the Gnostic Center team, and of course, and many others have been working. I also want to thank Dr. Chaya from Gujarat and many others who helped us make this draft. Of course, it's an evolving draft bill, which is now in the ministry. And if we also look at the mission of these 5 dreams, all this coming together, I think is a very significant movement. Of course, there would be some chaos, turbulence, whenever there's an evolutionary change, but we would have to bear with it and hold on to the deepest ideals that Mother and Sri Aurobindo have given us with complete faith and hope and belief that this will happen. So the relevance of these 5 dreams of Sri Aurobindo today for Auroville, for India and the world, I think is extremely significant. And if we really drop and shed the old ways and raise our consciousness and really fill it with truth, love, courage, and boldly move forward, I think this can be a great moment of transformation. And on this special moment in history, we can all together be a part of something which can really offer all these efforts. Of course, these are also huge personal sacrifices that people are making. But when it is really done with that feeling of consecration, you don't feel it's a sacrifice. You do take it as a part of the prasad, the sadhana that you are doing. And this is something that you are also growing within and without. And in that sense, I look at this point in time as a moment of great hope, great optimism and progress. Of course, it is something that may be enveloped with a lot of turbulence, churning, internal and on the outside, on the world level, at the level of Auroville and all of us. But I think it's a harbinger of some very beautiful things to manifest themselves. Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. Namaste.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi, for bringing in Sri Aurobindo's work through the prism of the new consciousness towards an understanding of his different visions for the world and all that it entails. Also, the relevance you brought in of the conjunction of his birthday with the birth of India's independence and of the greater unity via the spiritual map, not only of India, but eventually of the whole world. So thank you very much. And a reminder to everyone, please do put in your comments in the Q&A box and your questions, which will come up later. So now let us move on to our third honorable guest, Pashi Kapur. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Dr. Karan Singh, Dr. Jayanti Ravi, Radhe, Vladimir, and others who are supporting this platform today. Thank you very much for having me in this august company of Dr. Karan Singh and Dr. Jayanti Ravi. In any society, there are three categories of people. One, those who rule. The others who administer the rule. And third are the ones who are administered and ruled. It's symbolic that three of us today represent those three classes. I am the one who belongs to the normal, common citizen who are ruled. And I'm so happy and privileged to share my perspective of the five dreams in that context. Having been born in this period, before the partition of the country, I had 15 years to live in what is called United India. I was privileged and also received, let's say, environmental and social and political vibes of the period. Strangely enough, because my mother comes from Kashmir, although of Punjabi origin. My father was born in what is known as Pakhtunkhwa today. And in my time, it was known as Northwest Frontier Province. And I was born in Rawalpindi, which is the headquarters of Pakistan military today, and a few kilometers away from the capital of Pakistan. So I carry the cultures of three very important northern states of the then India. And as a person, on the night of 13th of August, I almost died as a part of the riots that I have faced directly. But I survived to come to Delhi to see the flag tricolor flying on the Red Fort on the 15th of August, 1947, in spite of the fact that my family decided to stay back in Pakistan. My perspectives are from that point of view of a common man. I lived my normal life for a long time till I came in contact with the mother in the early months of 1968. The first time, maybe there was something in me which was looking for something, searching for something. It ignited something that I wasn't even aware of. And that is what brought me into this experiment, what is called Auroville today. coming to the 5 dreams, to be honest with you, I wasn't fully aware of it even a few days back. I knew about Sri Aurobindo's 3 madnesses very well. But these 5 dreams, thanks to Dr. Jayanti, thanks to Vladimir, that I was given a precise description of those 5 dreams. And when I speak of those 5 dreams, I speak of those 5 dreams from my perspective as a man who has been part of this journey. And if you give me a moment. The first dream of independent India and remaining united. The way things are happening today, as I see it, Bangladesh in 1971, today Balochistan at the verge of separation, Waziristan in the same way, and Sindh, another part of Pakistan, is talking in terms of freedom from or independence in terms of those. So I see this dream as much in work or work in progress, as Dr. Jayanti mentioned. And this perhaps is one of the ones that I may be able to see in my own lifetime to be happening, not exactly as United India, but in different components, but with the same common aim. And that reminds me of having seen that United India's map, where mother used to sit in the playground, and that historic picture where Pandit Nehru sitting next to her, and 3 others who were virtually prime ministers of the country, one after the other, except for one, who decided rather than to serve the country otherwise, but otherwise in the same sequence, Indira Gandhi and Lal Bahadur Shastri. So in this context, I feel that Sri Aurobindo, who is for me, is the Rishi in the old tradition, a seer, who has visualized and seen the developments from an angle which most of us have not been able to see it. And in my context, when I came in contact with the ashram, with the mother for the first time, and had an opportunity of reading the Life Divine, it opened up a lot of vistas in my mind. It answered a lot of questions that I had, because I never understood what exactly is the purpose of our being, living a life like we do for ambitions and wealth and so on and so forth. And suddenly it occurred to me that this journey for me now starts with something that is not necessarily the first, second, or third, or the fourth dream, because they are, as I said, work in progress in any case, and naturally would happen. But I wanted to get into as a foot soldiers in the 5th dream. And there I wish to quote from the Life Divine, which basically inspired me. So now there will be established on earth a Gnostic consciousness and power which will shape a race of Gnostic spiritual beings and take up into itself all of earth nature that is ready for this new transformation. The chapter Gnostic Being. And then I become familiar with the Charter of Auroville, which is a beautiful expression of opening up the doors at the vastest level of experience and exploration. We all talk about it. Auroville belongs to nobody in particular. Auroville belongs to the humanity as a whole. But then hesitate in reading the next line. To live in Auroville, one must be a willing servitor to divine consciousness. For me, unless we delve on it individually and understand what it exactly means, the journey of Auroville, as it stands at present, is basically a more concentrated reflection of what is happening all over the world. And if this cloud has to burst and the sun has to shine, then we have to understand that role in its truest and honest self. And for me, another important aspect that has been very, very essential as far as my understanding is when Mother decided to build Matri Mandir, and she called it the soul of Auroville. With that also she expressed a hope. I wish Auroville will be the cradle of the Superman. That cradle of Superman perhaps will happen, and it must happen. You cannot even say in which time scale. But the Matri Mandir being there gives us a possibility, because that is, in fact, in my language, a meter where I can make an assessment as to what progress I'm making in becoming a better human being. There are 4 entrances to Matri Mandir. In Sanskrit, they have been named as Maheshwari, Mahasaraswati, Mahakali, and Mahalakshmi. Mother has been kind enough to give it a very modern language. Wisdom, knowledge, energy, power, beauty, and harmony. Knowledge on its own, which is the domain of the growing mind of today, is unable to distinguish between right and wrong, between positive and negative. Wisdom can guide it towards the positive. The power or vitality or Mahakali, used in that sense, when it is in positive mode, it only creates beauty and harmony. So there is that message all the time as far as we are concerned. At an individual level also, the Matri Mandir has 12 petals, each one named for a quality in us, a value in us. And our actual endeavor is that if we can relate those values and imbibe them in ourselves, perhaps we are on the way to a higher understanding or level of consciousness without giving it any specific name as such, because names sometimes can be misinterpreted, misread. Even spirituality, we all talk about it, but hardly anybody knows what spirituality means. Under these circumstances, I am a journeyman today, and I hope continue and contribute my little bit into this, and that little bit of my being this grain of the sand on the seaside in this journey of the 5th dream. Thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Pashi. Thank you very much for sharing. Thank you, Pashi. Thank you very much for sharing that very poignant and powerful transition from 13th of August to the 15th of August, 1947. Actually, the exact moment Sri Aurobindo was, perhaps writing, and when the Five Dreams was communicated to India, and your journey thereafter. So before, I don't want to take up any further time. I think there are many questions there waiting for everybody. I want to thank all three eminent personalities, speakers today. And I also want to thank Vladimir and Radhe for managing this whole session from behind. I'd like to pass on the question answer session to Radhe, and then we'll come back to close the session. Over to you, Radhe.
Thank you, Anu. So we'll just kind of go through several of these questions and leave it open to whichever esteemed panelist would like to answer first. Just open your mic. The first question here: the establishment of the United Nations as a step to human unity was one of the 5 dreams of Sri Aurobindo. Could the panelists please comment on the decision of the GOI not to endorse the recent motion at the Security Council to affirm the ideals and values of the United Nations?
I can say something.
Please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Go on.
I think that India,
Oh, sorry.
consonance with its historic rule, has always tried to bring people together rather than disunite. Therefore, I think the reason why we did not participate in that was we wanted to keep ourselves in a position where if the opportunity arises, we could become a bridge between warring factions rather than further that will carry the mission. That's my view. My view.
Thank you. Dr. Ravi or Pashi, would you like to comment?
In my opinion, United Nations, as it is constituted today, is perhaps the first step in that direction, but not really the United Nations that should be fulfilling the dream of Sri Aurobindo. Because nationalism, and sometimes a selfish nationalism, is at the back of each nation's reaction from time to time. And in the present crisis, I personally believe India has taken the right stand in terms of its dharma. I would rather not elaborate on it, but I think we are the closest in event of this conflict enlarging. On one side, we are sharing the border with China. Another side, we're sharing the border with Pakistan and also close enough to the Russian aspects and so on and so forth, where we are already having a conflicted situation, 2 of our neighbors. And I don't think it is appropriate in our circumstances to take sides in a situation like that. And generally, India has always been offering a middle course for all nations to resolve their conflicts across the table rather than by violent means or aggressive means as such. That's my opinion.
I tend to agree in principle with what has been shared by both the esteemed speakers. I think the role of United Nations, I think our approach, India's approach, has been one based on definitely neutrality, positivity, and of course with fairness and dignity, in the hope that we're able to resolve things in a more amicable manner with a positive approach here by discussions across. And at the same time, when it comes to things like the Sustainable Development Goals and several other initiatives of the United Nations, I think India has, whether it's climate change, all of these, India has taken a very positive and a very, shall I say, proactive role as well in it. So the establishment of the United Nations is indeed a step, and India is committed to that, is what I would like to say.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ravi. The next question. It seems that some progress is being made in all 5 dreams, some more, some less advanced. It seems these dreams will require that the first dream, India's freedom and unity, must be complete before other dreams can be fully unfolded. Could you kindly comment? Maybe Dr. Singh, we can turn that question to you first.
Well, as I said, it would be a marvelous thing. I do not think it is within the realm of the possible, even today or even 1,000 years from now. But many different ways, as I said, if something like SAR were to develop, that is the only way we can become myself. That would be very.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the next question, and this one will be directed to you, Dr. Jayanti Ravi. As Auroville secretary and a devotee, how do you intend to take Sri Aurobindo's vision forward in the challenging scenario prevailing across the world? Dr. Ravi?
Yes, I think, as we've often heard it said, Auroville is also a kind of reflection of, it's a small reflection of the complexity of conflicts, human nature at a macro level or at a larger macro level that is actually manifest in the world. So there would be, but the very fact that we're all here together, of course, it does mean that we have to, as Pashiji also said, the first thing that we all collectively have to do is to really start looking at how is it that individually each one of us can raise our consciousness and sit across the table, and in that true sense, how can we be willing servitors of divine consciousness? And in that direction, there are many initiatives. The last 8 odd months, I have, with all sincerity and with the highest aspiration in mind, interacted with almost all different members of different communities, different professional groups, different enterprises, different working groups, etc. And so has the governing board. And in addition, I also feel that now with processes like the Citizens Assembly, these may not be technically legal entities which are sort of stamped by the Auroville Foundation Act. But it's important that we get all these points of view, but in a space where we're dealing with a lot of respect and dignity for each other, where we can share thoughts, but from a raised level of consciousness. So we are trying to do that, whether it was dream weaving. And I think all these are very beautiful movements that are happening. Of course, it also will entail some churning, which is reflective of the churning happening elsewhere. But any revolutionary process is going to have these pain points. It's going to have certain choice points, chance points, as we say in game theory, and decision trees. But I think, I'm sure that it would be a movement which will lead to progress and without compromising really on human unity, because ultimately all of them go together. And when we raise our consciousness, I think that is definitely possible.
Thank you. The next question, the division between the Hindus and Muslims appears to be strengthened by the political parties that has taken advantage.
Can I interrupt you, because Pashi
Sure.
wanted to add something?
Oh,
Sorry.
I'm so sorry. Absolutely. Please.
You see, Auroville, genesis of Auroville is in the description of Sri Aurobindo evolutionary process, where Aurobindo says it very specifically that the present top rung of this evolution, the man with a mind which is still evolving, has the possibility of raising the consciousness to collaborate with the natural process of evolution to hasten it. And in this context, referring to your earlier question, I want to also say that because evolutionary process is not linear, it is more spherical, if you want to look at it that way, where every situation is the right one at the given time. Same are the human beings, their growth, their patterns, and so on and so forth. In that context, when Mother talked about Auroville as the cradle of the Superman, that was at the back of her mind. And that is a journey where Auroville is supposed to be a in situ experiment. Why a number of 50,000 was thought, as I have understood, that a collective consciousness is the only way that can help consciously bring about a change in terms of evolutionary process, what is called mutation. From the mental to the psychic, and from psychic to the spiritual, that is the purpose of Auroville, not basically being an instrument of propaganda. It has to live it, and the people have to see and know that it is possible, that it can happen anywhere else. That is my perception about this. Thank you.
Thank you. I apologize for that, but appreciate the answer. Okay, with that, then I'll move on to the next question. The division between the Hindus and Muslims appears to be strengthened by the political parties that has taken advantage by divinizing forces. What is a way forward to make Bharat Mata strong so that she can play more constructive role in the world for the manifestation of the higher order? What Indians can do to facilitate the coming of that? Please.
Well, as you know, I come from Jammu and Kashmir, which is a Muslim majority state. I've grown up worshipping at Muslim shrines as well as at that time in Kashmir, there was no real difference between worship at Victoria, also at I worship at Iravani and also at Chirai. What has happened is that this polarization is taking place. To ask what we can do. What we can do is to strengthen the interfaith. For 40 years, I've been involved in the interfaith. As you know, began in 1893, the first parliament of the world, Chicago. Swami Vivekananda's famous. Now, from that time onwards, many interfaith organizations. I happen to belong to one called the Temple of Understanding. These interfaith organizations are dedicated towards trying to develop harmony between, bring people together, not in a Shastras to prove who's right or who's wrong, but in an attempt to foster the understanding between different religions. I've been active in this for 40, and I would suggest that strengthening the interfaith movement is a very important way in you can overcome the polarization.
Dr. Ravi, Pashi, any comments?
I would like to, would Pashiji like to go first? Pashiji?
It's yours.
Okay.
You won't see you must have to answer all the questions.
We can pass it too if there's a paucity of time. But I think if we go back to the speech of Sri Aurobindo, there's something that I really liked here. He talks about these words, overriding and consummating oneness. And then he distinguishes between oneness and unity. So oneness, possibly for us to realize that we're all equal, whether it's any the so-called differences in terms of gender, caste, religion, social status, economic status, to realize there is that oneness, not making it a very standardized, uniform thing, but in a harmonizing way. We have a distinct, somebody from the southern part of India may have a distinct culture from another part of India, respecting those identities and yet harmonizing it rather than making everybody uniform. But that oneness, if there is a logical conclusion with that oneness, if we really plumb for a deeper and higher truth, and where there is action, that oneness gets united. I have a small example. I don't know if we have the time for it, Radhe, but many years back, I remember there was a school in Ahmedabad. It's a very simple incident that happened, and it was a very windy day. It's a very nice school called CN Vidyalaya. Those who are connected with Ahmedabad would know about it. And it has a Shanti Niketan, like since Dr. Karan Singh also quoted Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore. It's a beautiful school, a very old school, and has a certain tradition. So we were lighting the lamp, when there is a program, there are guests invited to light a lamp, which is how many of these programs begin. So I remember there were these different wicks, and it was very windy, and we had Kartikeya Sarabhai was also one of the guests that day, and we were all trying to light individual wicks, and it would go off. Then it just occurred to us, why don't we collect all the wicks together? So instead of having 5 different wicks like that, that was oneness. Each wick had its own potential, but when we united them together and lit, it surprisingly stayed on. The wind was not able to blow it out. So I think it's this oneness and unity. And when I read the speech, that image and that incident came to my mind. I just felt like sharing it. Thank you.
Enlightened education is one of the possibilities that will remove these barriers that we have created for ourselves. And I'm very happy to say that Auroville, we have members of all the religions represented here, including the Muslims, Jews, Hindus, and various other tribes, and virtually all the political systems of the country that people have grown up from. And all of those are here basically to find a new system, new way of life as guided by the mother. And I think there is no such thing that you can say that you have a magic wand and you can change things overnight. This is a process of enlightenment, individual and collective. And sooner or later, it is bound to happen because that is what is intended by the divine consciousness. That's my firm belief. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're just about at our time here. I will just, and let's just have just one more question here. And then Anu, I'll turn it back over to you for the closing. The question is, I will be spending 1 year in India for my sabbatical. I aspire to constructively use my time. How can I be involved, or how can I help to advance these dreams? Yes, Dr.
If I
Ravi.
be permitted to, Arpan, we are very happy to hear. We don't know you, as in I'm just seeing your name here for the first time, but we would really like to welcome young people to come and offer and to work, and we would like to invite you to work with certain projects here. So I think the first step would be if you can share your profile and what is it that you would like to do with our team here. I can, since Chandresh Patelji is also sitting here, I'll probably request you can look for his email, chandresh@auroville.org.in. If you can write to us, and I'm sure we really need a lot of young people with a lot of positivity, energy to make all this happen. We would love to welcome you.
Shall I close it now. Radhe?
Sure, please, Anu.
So thanks everyone for being here this evening and for everybody who helped in this session. So as we close our webinar today, here's a quick reminder that tomorrow is our final webinar session, and the topic is spiritual education with esteemed speakers like Dr. David Frawley, who is an IAC member, the International Advisory Council member, Sri Aravindan Neelakandan, who is our governing board member, Amita Mehra, who was our previous governing board member and is part of one of the founders of Gnostic Center, and Janaka Kandwala, who is the director of Silver Oak University. So let us close our program today with a short group meditation.
तत्सवितुर्भरमरूपं ज्योतिः परस्य धीमहि यन्नः सत्येन दीपये सत्येन दीपये ॐ तत्सवितुर्भरमरूपं ज्योतिः परस्य धीमहि यन्नः सत्येन दीपये सत्येन दीपये तत्सवितुर्भरमरूपं ज्योतिः परस्य धीमहि यन्नः सत्येन दीपये सत्येन दीपये ॐ तत्सवितुर्भरमरूपं ज्योतिः परस्य धीमहि यन्नः सत्येन दीपये सत्येन दीपये
सत्यमयी परमेश्वरी